You're listening to your local radio station, BBC Radio Bristol, and I'm delighted to say, joining me on his 76th birthday is Charlie Dobson. Charlie, welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Not at all. Real pleasure to have you on the programme. Are you celebrating on your birthday? Are you doing anything later tonight?
Going out tonight with my wife, my son and my 2 grandchildren and my daughter-in-law.
Lovely. Well, you have a great time, Charlie.
Thank you.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have Charlie in the studio. He's going to tell us about the bands that he was in the 1960s, and we're going to play some music from those bands. But I want to talk more broadly about what you've done over the years, because your life story is, I think, remarkable. You were born in a council house in Rudgway, weren't you?
That's right. Yeah, my wife has said, Mary said, the only difference between the council house that I was born in and the one that Sir Paul McCartney was born in was there's not a plaque on the front which is saying Charlie Dobson was born here.
Well, maybe in later years we'll do that. What about your education? What were you like at school?
Unfortunately, I failed the 11 plus and I ended up at Thornbury Secondary Modern. Dear,
oh dear. But you always loved singing. And I know in your early days, your mum used to sort of drag you around singing competitions, didn't she?
Dragged me around everywhere. Winter Gardens, Weston-super-Mare, the Colston Hall in talent contests, singing to old ladies at women's institutes and that.
Were you happy to do that?
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And you won some prizes, didn't you, here and there?
Yeah. I think the Carol Levis Discoveries back in the 50s. I was 10 at the time.
What was your repertoire at that time then as a young man?
Songs that my mother used to drum into me, like If I Can Help Somebody and At the End of the Day, Just Kneel and Pray. And of course the old ladies used to love that.
I bet you look very sweet, especially you wore short trousers. Now you did love art and you passed the entrance exam into the Royal West of England College of Art in Clifton, and it was there that you met your wife Mary. She was just 16 at the time, I think, wasn't she?
She was 16, I was 15, and I remember the very first words I spoke to her. On the very first day, this was the summer of 59, probably June or July. It was just like a grown-up school. There were desks, rows of desks, and an aisle between. And it was a pencil sketch we were tasked with, the very first job we had to do. And I looked to my right, and there was a very nice young girl there, Olivia Newton-John type ponytail, blonde, and a hula hoop skirt. And my pencil sketch was getting in a real mess. And I looked across to this young girl to my right and uttered the immortal words, "Do you have a rubber?"
What a chat-up line. It's a lovely story, because you've been together for how many years now?
Our first date was on the 4th of February in 1960, so that was 60 years ago today.
Where did you go for your first date?
I was coming up to my 16th birthday, and you didn't ask direct for a date. You had to pass it through friends in those days. So I passed the message on that it was coming up to my 16th birthday. And would she care to go to the cinema with me? It was a Cliff Richard film, brand new release, Espresso Bongo. And back came the message, well, seeing as it's your birthday, she'll go with you. So I thought, thank you very much.
Nice concession. Lovely. Now, sadly, your dad died at the very early age of 48. What did he die of?
Well, unfortunately, he had a very sad life. He lost his first wife up in Yorkshire. And unfortunately, a drink got to the better of him, and he was a lovely father.
So he did his liver in, basically, did he?
Yes.
But he was 48 when he died, and you'd only got 6 months into your college course, hadn't you? And you had to leave college because your family had no money.
Exactly. I had to leave double quick and get myself a job to help my mother pay the council house rent.
Did you have any siblings?
I had one sister living with me, an older sister.
Yeah, but it was basically down to you as then the man of the household.
That's it.
As a teenager, to get some money just to help your mum out.
You got it.
How did you feel about leaving the art college?
It was a real blow, in as much it's a double whammy. First of all, having your father die when you're 16 and being so young, he was 48. That was blow number one. And of course, the second blow was, bear in mind, I was a little village boy in Rudgway, and I'd just gone to a big grown-up place in Bristol, art college, and I had to leave there as well. So it was like a double whammy. So,
gosh, I bet you felt very crestfallen. But of course, you had Mary by then, didn't you? So.
Well. There's another quick story. Suddenly I got a letter in the post to 9 council houses, Rudgway. This would have been in the summer of 1960. She was still at art college, you see.
Yes.
And I was then in a job, and I got this letter from Mary wanting to know whether perhaps we could meet up. And I thought it was one of my art college students playing a game with me, because I'd been chasing her and she didn't want to know, really. You know, the last time I saw her was when we went to the cinema.
She'd been playing hard to get, you see.
Yeah. And she wrote this letter to Charlie Dobson at 9 council houses, Rudgway. 9 council houses, I thought, well, you know, that's not that special address. So I went up to the local councillor, Maggie Hadrod, lived up the road and towards Alveston. And I wanted to know whether I could change the name of the council houses to perhaps something a bit more upmarket.
Yeah, well, I don't blame you.
So she said, well, you must get the approval of your neighbours, and if they all agree, we'll change it. So she said, have you got any ideas for now? I said, yeah, I've got the name. I'd like Briar Lees. And she said, well, see if they like it. And it was subsequently changed to Briar Lees. And I remember telling Bob Woodward, the Click founder, who's looked after a charity that my wife and I are involved with, he said, Charlie, I don't think you aimed high enough. You should have gone for the mansions.
Would have set a nice tone, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it? Yeah.
Well, you ended up getting a job in a sign company, earning £8 a week. You were drawing letters for signs. And then you got involved in music, of course. And your first band, we already mentioned them, Danny Clark and the Jaguars. Just tell me about that outfit. Well, first of all, why Danny Clark? Why did you change your name?
Charlie Dobson didn't sound too good, did it, in those days? And the next door neighbour was Mr. and Mrs. Clark, so I had the surname. I don't know what made me choose Danny, but anyway, that's how it came.
Well, people still remember you locally, and you played an awful lot locally. You played warm-up to acts. In fact, we've been talking about Longleat on the show today. You used to play at Longleat, didn't you?
We played a couple of gigs at Longleat. The first one was with an Irish trio at the time called The Bachelors, and we were very successful at that as the warm-up act for The Bachelors. And we were then invited to go about a month later, and we were the warm-up act for the Rolling Stones.
Well, they subsequently just died out. Nobody remembers them any longer. No, seriously, what do you remember of the Rolling Stones at that concert?
They wouldn't speak to us. You know, we were just low life. But the interesting thing at the time, it was 2 and sixpence to see the Rolling Stones, which was 12.5 pence in today's money.
Yes.
And if you took your wheels along, it was another 2 and sixpence. So that's 25 pence to see the Rolling Stones.
Well, Mick Jagger always had an eye on the money, I know that. Well, you then left Danny Clark and the Jaguars and formed your new band, Force West. And let's have a bit of music, shall we? We'll talk about the track in a moment, but this is a song that you've recently put to digital. It's called Long Day, and it features you on vocals, doesn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Let's hear it.
So I'm begging you, forget him, he won't come. Took you in, abused you, but you went on believing. 'Cause love is blind, he can do no wrong. And as I stand before you, you still don't really see it. You can't believe that he has really gone. And tomorrow
still sounds pretty good. You must be proud of this recording, Charlie.
It was a great recording. It was written by the lead guitarist, Brian Trussler. We went up London, I believe it was in Abbey Road where we did it. And, well, you can imagine the disappointment when they decided it was not worthy.
Well, you had a manager called Jim Buckingham. He was known as the Brian Epstein of Bristol.
That's right. Great manager. Yeah.
And he got you a deal with Decca, didn't he, I think?
That's right, the first one, 1965, I think that was.
Now, your first single, which was written by Dusty Springfield's songwriter, that got nowhere, didn't it?
That's right, yeah.
I tell you what, this was unreleased, wasn't it, this particular track?
That's right,
It's a cracking tune, you know.
Yeah,
There's lovely harmonies on it. And in all, you released, 8 singles, I think,
yes.
didn't you? And for a time, I suppose it must have been looking optimistic for you. You must have thought you were on a crest of a wave.
Yeah, yeah. And we were quite popular in the Southwest. But the big time was always just around the corner, you know.
Well, we'll talk a bit about your music in a minute, but let's talk about your career, because you left the band ultimately in 1969, and then you were offered in 1970 a third share partnership in a business, a local sign company. They wanted £1,000, which was a lot of money in those days, and you could only rustle up, I think, 600, couldn't you?
That's right. That was our life savings. Mary and I got married in 1967, and by 1969, I think our total life savings, then we've been saving up ever since we were youngsters, you know, and courting, was £600.
So that was incredibly risky, that you'd put all your money into this prospect that could possibly go belly up.
Yeah, and we just had a baby was on its way, you see.
Well, it worked out because the company was very successful, and you...
Well, that was not quite, Steve. The first company that I was offered the partnership in,
yes,
that was in 1970.
Yeah, but you left in 76, didn't you?
Yeah, and then I formed my own company.
No, but what I'm saying is the company that you put that initial money into,
it
ticked along nicely, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. I think they were doing about 500,000 sales when I left them, and that was in 1975.
Why did you decide to leave in 76? What was the reason for that?
Sometimes partnerships don't work out, and my wife and I we were doing. She was working at home. We had our baby Julian, and my wife was designing lots of bits and pieces. And when it came time for Julian to go to his nursery, she wanted to come down to the office and work on the drawing board in the office with me. But
one thing we should emphasise is that the company that you ultimately formed with your wife, Spandex, was a partnership. It was you and your wife, and your wife created wonderful things. She was an innovator, wasn't she?
Oh yeah.
And it was very much you and her working together as a team, wasn't it?
And my wife and I were working together in the original partnership, but they had an aversion to women in the business.
Because it sounds like Mary is a top talent.
Oh yeah.
You formed Spandex 76. You were in rented offices in Portland Square in Bristol.
Yeah.
Pretty humble beginnings to start with. But it took off rapidly, didn't it?
Oh yes, yeah. Our first product was a product called Slats. It was a directory board system to guide people in and around hospitals. And Mary and I designed the product, and it was strips of aluminium, basically, that clipped onto clips. It was a rapid way of making directory boards. Up until that point, sign makers would have to get sheets of aluminium and guillotines and screw holes and drill holes in strips of aluminium. But this slat system was, just chop the slats to the length you wanted and snick them on some clips.
Well, it was the start of a brand new era, and it might seem quite prosaic, but actually for thousands of years, people had painted signs and put them together in a rudimentary fashion, and it was a new way of doing it in a quick, easy to way to put together. And then you expanded, you got new designs, innovative sign equipment, and then you had this exclusive deal where you worked with an American company because they'd invented a way of printing vinyl letters, didn't they?
Yeah, or cutting vinyl letters.
Yeah.
Up until that point, if you had a truck and you wanted it, some lettering on the side, it would have to be typically painted on there by a signwriter with pots of paint and a signwriting brush. Well,
take ages.
Yeah, and then the Americans invented this fantastic computer which cut coloured vinyl. It was like shall we say, a computer-controlled scalpel. And the sign makers junked their paints and paintbrushes and bought into this new technology wholesale.
Now, you went over to America to bid for this because you wanted to distribute it in this country and in Europe. And I think they were originally going to go with 2 companies, but you said, let me have all of it and I'll prove I can sell enough.
Correct,
and
yeah.
you did, didn't you?
That's right. They said, well, how many do you think you can sell each year, Charlie, in the UK? And the director of this company, or the president, as they call him over there, had a piece of paper on his desk face down, and he said, how many do you think you'll be able to sell in a year? So I had to shoot from the hip. I should have been prepared for that question. So I shot from the hip, and I said, I think we can sell 100 a year. And he turned over this piece of paper and had all the countries down there. And sure enough, on the UK, had 100. So I guessed right.
But you sold more than that, didn't you?
We sold 200 in the first year. So that gave us the absolute exclusive distribution.
But what's great about you and your wife Mary is that you continue to add value, because she designed Arabic signs, didn't she?
Mary developed the first Arabic font to cut vinyl letters, and when we took it over to, I believe it was Abu Dhabi, we on an exhibition, of course, the Arab visitors were at the exhibition, and they couldn't believe their eyes. This machine, this computer cutting Arabic text, and so Allah had blessed it or something like that.
And you had a brilliant team. There's a photograph here of the team at the time. I mean, you employed good people, didn't you?
Oh, they're young people, great design team. You see, we decided, rather than going out to an advertising agency to take a brief, the creators ads and all the rest of it, coming from a graphics design background, and Mary had quite a grip on how things should look and be presented. We brought in young people and we created our own design team, and they were fantastic young people in their 20s. Mark Gautieri, who's run the successful business now, Alison Gascoigne, Alice got a great business. They were just wonderful.
Well, I'm just reading up on you and your wife Mary there. I mean, you constantly were striving for excellence to get new ways of innovating the market. And if your competitors were snapping at your heels, you found a way of keeping ahead of the market, didn't you?
Oh, yes.
But eventually you thought, well, we've done our bit. You're going to sell the company. And you sold it in 1998 for £110 million.
Yeah, that's right.
It would have been more, wouldn't it, if the exchange rate had been different?
Yeah, I think it was $185 million, which converted at that time into about $110 million. So I think now it would have been worth probably about 106 or something.
How do you feel about that entity that you built up with your wife in, a relatively short space of time, a massive company with a huge turnover that you created?
Well, I don't know how we did it, or
is it a dream?
Well, it could well have been. Yeah, I didn't have any training on marketing or selling. It just came to me, We got this product, and I had a terrific designer, my wife, who were very creative. She could think three-dimension. When we designed strips of aluminium, for some of them had to be mitered on the corners, and she would immediately do a 3D sketch and make sure that they all fitted together.
And this was before you could do it on a computer. You had to just do it in your mind.
The extruding company we used, which was a company at the time called Alcan Aluminium, could not believe that someone outside of their drawing office could present them with ready-to-go drawings. All the tolerances marked on there, plus or minus so many thou. I mean...
Blimey. Well, she sounds like a remarkable woman. You certainly married very well there. Now, since you sold the company, you've been involved in lots of other things. We should mention the family charity, the Starfish Trust, which you founded together with your wife. And you mentioned Bob Woodward. He was involved with it, that lovely fella. Yeah. And just in a nutshell, just sum up the Starfish Trust, if people want to Google it. What does it do?
Well, it's our, I suppose in a strange sort of way, it's our dirty little secret, our family secret, in as much that... the family funds it, so we don't need to have a big presence going out, knocking on doors, shaking tins, asking for money. It's completely the opposite. So we keep a reasonably low profile, but we've done, I think, quite a bit of good over the years.
You're being too modest. I mean, roughly how much money have you put into it over the years?
You asked the question, Steve, but... It's 7 million at the moment, I think, close to 7 million.
And what sort of projects, what sort of things have you been funding through that?
The Bristol Children's Hospice was a good one, and I'll just go back to Bob Woodward at this point. Bob was a master of squeezing money out of people, and he approached Mary and I back in 2003, I think. He said, they're thinking of building a children's hospice in Bristol, and would you, Mary, consider giving them a good slug to kick them off, So I said, well, how much are you looking for, Bob? He said, well, one big one would be good, $1 million. So, all right then, okay. So, but this is the good thing about Bob. He then went to another Bristol charity, the John James Trust, and said, hey, the Starfish Trust, they're looking at kickstart and helping to kickstart a new children's hospice in Bristol. They're putting in $1 million. Would you care to match it? And of course they did. So instead of $1 million, it became $2 million.
And it snowballed, of course.
Yeah.
Well, we've got to finish up with another word about your music because we're running out of time. And you had all these tapes, the original master tapes.
Yeah.
And you've converted them to digital. And we heard that wonderful tune a minute ago, which was never released. I want to just dip into the other couple that you've sent me. Now, this is a version of Sherry. Now, you're singing on this, I think, aren't you?
Yeah. And don't blame me, folks, for the reggae beats. This was the idea of our producer at the time. We think we should give Sherry a reggae beat.
OK, well, let's just hear this. How were you able to get those high notes then?
Oh,
That is Force West, who were a popular local band in the 1960s, and that's a recording of Sherry, of course, with Charlie on vocals. Where was that recorded? Any idea?
that would have been in Abbey Road as well.
What are your memories of those recording sessions? I mean, such a legendary studio.
Yeah, not too many. I know the very first one we cut in Abbey Road, we went into the studio to make our very first recording. They said you're in studio number 2 or something. So us 4 youngsters from Bristol went in, and we opened the door and they guided us in, and there were about a 25-piece orchestra, violin. So we thought, hey, we're in the wrong place here. So we backed out and started. They said, well, no, it's in that. They had an orchestra waiting for. Yeah, we didn't realize.
Well, you did 8 singles with the band, and then you left, and then the band continued under another name, Chicane, wasn't it?
Chicane, yeah.
And there's a recording here which was also found by you of Lola, of course, the Kinks classic. Just tell me briefly about this.
Well, I was more of a sort of melody, harmony, lovey-dovey type song singer, but the band changed direction. They went into more sort of heavy or rock and roll type music, and they did a cover of the Kinks song Lola. And Jim Buckingham played this to the Kinks manager. The manager then played it to Ray Davies, who actually said, and I quote, "This is the best cover I've ever heard of Lola." And this was Chicane, my old band, and it's fantastic.
Not bad at all, is it?
No, it's fantastic. There you are.
Tell me a little bit about you. I mean, you're 76 today.
Yeah.
Are you looking back on a successful career? It could hardly have been better. You've still got a solid marriage with Mary, presumably.
Yeah, oh yeah.
No cracks over the years?
Oh no.
No. And how do you spend your time these days, other than your charity work, I mean?
We spend, in our old age, go to Spain quite a bit to get some sunshine into our old bones, you know, because 76-ish, you get a bit weary, so we spend quite a time in the sunshine.
There have been many of your contemporaries, though, who never had the career that you had over the years. I mean, you've worked hard, but you've also been lucky, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. We were at the right place at the right time in the 80s, and it was great.
Well, what a pleasure to meet you today, Charlie. Thank you so much for coming in, sharing your memories and telling your stories. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Not
Thank
at all.
you.
Happy birthday. Have a good day.
Okay, thank you.
That's the wonderful Charlie Dobson, the man who, together with his wife, Mary, formed the company Spandex, which he eventually sold for £110 million and does good work through the charity, the Starfish Trust, founded in 1988.